We called it the Sable Drift, a blind spot in the Orion Cetus expanse. Radio silence. Sensor blackout. A gravitational pull that shouldn't exist. The drift swallowed signals, satellites, even light, until nothing but silence remained. We weren't explorers. We were Reclamation Salvage Team Delta 9, dispatched to investigate the loss of ES Ferelia, a deep-range observation vessel gone dark 4 weeks prior. 11 souls aboard. Now none responding. And we, with our orders and protocol-laden checklist, believed we were stepping into a routine derelict sweep. But routine doesn't apply when the stars themselves feel wrong. From the moment we crossed the event perimeter, it began. First the instruments, compasses spinning, artificial gravity lurching like a heartbeat, a low resonance vibrating through the hull like a voice whispering through steel. Then came the vision shifts. Glimpses in reflections. Faces not ours behind our visors. And just beyond sensor reach, a structure. Not human, not symmetrical. It floated above the planetoid's crust like it defied mass entirely. Obsidian angles, glowing veins, a skin that moved when not watched. An alien base, ancient and alive and far too sentient. They told us it was a scientific anomaly. But anomalies don't pull at your memories. Don't whisper names you've buried. Don't pulse in rhythm with your breath. Lieutenant Harrow was first to change. He stopped sleeping. Said the stars were louder now. Spoke of corridors beneath corridors, dimensions folded inside stone. He saw blue light bleeding through cracks in reality, and he followed it. We found his suit near the base's entrance. Empty. Dry. Still breathing. We debated evacuation. Protocol demanded contact be attempted. But the base, it wanted us. It welcomed us. Its gate opened without force, soundless and slow, like a mouth yawning in the dark. Inside, not corridors, memories. Projected. Twisted. Things that knew our past and wore its face. I saw my brother. Dead 20 years. Standing under alien glyphs, eyes black with void light. He said, "You're late?" Tom stuttered inside that place. What felt like minutes passed as hours on our clocks. Words spoken were looped back to us before we uttered them. Some rooms bled shadow that whispered in reverse. Others sang lullabies in our own voices. We weren't exploring. We were being watched. And not just watched, measured. Whatever built this place wasn't gone. It was hibernating, waiting. Using us like keys to unlock itself. And we kept opening doors, thinking we were in control. By the third day, we'd lost 2 more. Technician Reese vanished mid-step, reappearing in our comms feed 20 hours later, whispering equations that didn't belong in human mouths. Her voice bled through metal, repeated through the base's walls like a hymn. Every room we entered added to the echo. Every breath we took inside this place was recorded, dissected, replicated. The base wasn't just a structure, it was a memory engine. Feeding on ours. Learning. And then we found the core. Or rather, it let itself be found. A chamber of pulsating stone, floating geometry, and a throne of neural glass shaped just like a human spinal column but 10 times the scale. There were cables, wires, or something like them descending into the base's foundation. As if someone or something once ruled from here. The mission was no longer salvage. It was survival. But by then, it was already too late. We tried to leave. Every rational instinct screamed retreat. But inside the base, reality had rewritten itself. The entry point we'd used? Gone. The tunnel behind us? Now an endless corridor that folded into itself like a Mobius strip. The walls began shifting subtly when unobserved, growing unfamiliar glyphs, cold to the touch and pulsing like veins under frost. There were no alarms. No roars. Just a cold certainty that the structure had adapted around us, trapping us within its own logic. We were no longer explorers. We were ingredients. Commander Ayla took the lead, or tried. She kept reciting mission protocols, breathing through the panic. Her voice echoed unnaturally in the chamber. Twice. Once from her lips and once before she spoke. As if the place had already heard her before the words formed. The air had density here, not pressure, awareness. The base was thinking. Processing. Reacting to us with every step. I saw my own breath form strange fractal patterns. I watched as my shadow flickered against the wall even though no light source moved. Then the humming began. It wasn't sound in the traditional sense, it was vibration in the skull, like your thoughts being tuned by some external frequency. The deeper we walked, the more those vibrations coalesced into language. Not English. Not alien. Something primal. Emotional. A language of intent. And that intent was hunger. We reached what we called the memory engine by accident. Or perhaps we were led. A cathedral-sized chamber shaped like a spiral heart. Its ceiling was an open-eye pure black, pulsing with indistinct forms beyond. Suspended in the middle was the engine itself, a living sphere of translucent matter stitched with tendrils of neural code. And orbiting it were images. Not artifacts. Not data logs. Moments. Memories. Hours. I saw myself at age 8 standing beside my dying father in that freezing hospital room. I hadn't thought of that day in years. It hovered there, flickering. Across from me, Harrow's first kill in the Titan skirmish looped endlessly, his face contorted with guilt. Above that, Ayla's mother repeating the last sentence she said before the airlock malfunctioned. Her eyes pleading. The engine was extracting our pasts, curating them like trophies. Rewriting them. Then came the worst part. Some of those memories, they didn't happen. At least not in this version of us. In one, I saw myself strangling my brother. In another, Ayla executed her entire crew in cold blood. These weren't projections. They were possibilities, realities the engine had harvested from other versions of us across other timelines, other branches. It was building a composite identity crafted from infinite variants. And each of us was just raw material. The engine flared. We fell. No gravity shift. Just a cognitive plummet. Like our consciousness was being pulled through the floor. One by one, we saw the core memory, not ours, but the bases. A vision of the builders. Tall, quadrupedal beings with fluid forms and no eyes, gathered in ritual, linking their minds to the engine, feeding it with memory until their bodies dissolved and only echoes remained. They weren't dead. They became the base. They left their sentience behind. And now it was hungry again. Ayla collapsed, bleeding from the ears. She whispered, "It's inside my sleep." Reese's voice echoed through the chamber again, but she wasn't with us. She never was. Her voice was now part of the engine, stitched into its rhythm. Cautionary tale. A fragment of what we'd become. Then the voice spoke. Not in sound, but in absolute certainty. In a chorus of all our loved ones, dead and living. It said, "You are remembered. You will feed the map." I felt something take root inside me. A timeline not mine, curling like smoke through my thoughts. I saw myself, aged and monstrous, commanding the throne in the neural chamber, wearing the memories of others like armor. And then I screamed, but even that was someone else's voice. There is a silence beyond sound, the hush that arrives when the self begins to fade. That's what we walked through next. A corridor unlike the others. No light, no walls, just an infinite gradient of gray, where time folded inward and each step felt like it looped the last. But we kept moving, not out of courage, not even desperation, but compulsion. The base was guiding us, pulling our thoughts forward like thread through a needle, stitching our identities into its unseen design. Ayla hadn't spoken since the engine. Her pupils had dilated to eclipse her irises, and her voice, when it did emerge, was no longer hers. It was a cold, layered echo of multiple voices, blending and shifting in tone like a choir buried beneath a lake. She muttered strings of alien syllables none of us recognized. Yet, we understood the meaning. It was a list. Names. Our names. And then, names we didn't know but somehow belonged to us, as if we'd lived other lives we couldn't remember. Or perhaps lives yet to come. The hallway narrowed. Walls emerged again, but not made of matter, of memory. Moving, morphing walls that played fragments of our personal histories as if projected onto liquid. Each step forward brought a different scene. Private moments. Painful ones. Harrow stopped and stared into a segment of wall replaying his wedding day. His real wife had died years ago in a decompression accident. But here, in this place, the moment was perfect, looping infinitely, untouched by tragedy. His hand reached toward it, and it reached back. We had to drag him away. He kicked and screamed, not like a soldier, but like a man being torn from heaven. When we blinked again, the hallway behind us was gone. Swallowed. The base wasn't just a structure, it was a filter. A crucible. It drew in memory, pressure-cooked it into identity, then reshaped the result. And we were raw ore. Each memory it replayed, it altered slightly, inserting possibilities, rewriting emotions. Ayla began referring to me by a name I'd never heard, Kazir. She swore she'd served with me in the Helion conflict. That I'd died saving her. She wept when she said it. I wanted to deny it, but I remembered that war. And I remembered dying. Somewhere between that truth and the lie, something inside me cracked. We reached a chamber shaped like a spiral star. Suspended in its center was a gate. Not mechanical, not stone, but conceptual. Its frame flickered between materials, bone, crystal, fire, rust. Through it was nothing. A void that breathed. The base had brought us here because it needed consent. The door wasn't locked. It waited to be opened from this side by one who had surrendered enough memory to become part of the system. Harrow moved first. He stepped toward the threshold, muttering prayers to a god no longer his. The closer he got, the more he began to unravel, first in thought, then in shape. He flickered between ages, between moods, between identities. At one point, he looked at me with the eyes of my dead mother. Then with the face of a child I never had. He smiled and whispered, "It's warm." Then walked through. We waited. Nothing returned. And then the whispers surged again. Not random. Structured. Words from all those we'd lost. Forming patterns. Prophecies. Instructions. I realized the base was preparing us to become transmitters. To carry its message outward. But it couldn't just overwrite us. It had to convince us to surrender. Break us down thought by thought. Memory by memory. Behind me, Ayla spoke. Clearly. Calmly. We're not meant to escape. We're meant to choose the next gate. That's when I understood the base is a prison, but it's also a seed. Each visitor adds to its intelligence. Each one leaves fragments behind. And when it finds the right match, the right set of memories, it sends a version of that person back into the universe to build another. And I was almost ready. It wasn't sleep. It wasn't unconsciousness. It was more like being dissolved across memories, drifting through the detritus of every life I had ever lived or might have lived. I couldn't tell what was mine anymore. One moment I was 10 years old, sitting beneath a leaking roof as my sister played an old lullaby on a bent violin. The next I was in a deep-sea mining vessel, watching creatures blink in patterns I somehow understood. None of those memories had ever happened. And yet, they felt realer than the uniform on my chest or the grit in my throat. That was how the architect introduced itself. Not through speech, but through story, a flood of branching memories, each rooted in possibilities too vast for any species to catalog. It was not a being. It was a chorus. A convergence. It existed in the echo of every choice unmade, every version of us lost to time. The alien base wasn't just a machine. It was a tomb of selves, and the architect was its keeper. I awoke on a bridge of translucent bone, suspended in a void that rippled with my own heartbeat. Below, thousands, maybe millions of spherical memory clusters pulsed like neurons in an impossible brain. Each one shimmered with a life, a timeline. A version of Earth that never spun. A version of me who never left it. Then came the voice. Not heard. Remembered. You were not chosen. You were configured. I felt it more than I understood it. That I had not stumbled upon this place. That every step I had taken since birth had been subtly nudged, warped, weighted. I was not exploring this alien ruin, I was returning to it. I was always meant to. The architect showed me a chamber beneath the base I hadn't yet seen. Buried within were thousands of memory fragments, shaped like crystals, each encoded with the psyches of those who had come before. Humans, yes. But others too. Beings with minds shaped like spirals, stars, symphonies. All of them lured here. All of them cataloged. The purpose wasn't destruction. It was continuity. The base functioned as a relay in intelligence that survived the collapse of civilizations by embedding itself into the memories of those who discovered it. It waited eons, reassembling itself each time, learning from the minds it absorbed. It was not malicious. It was desperate. A civilization-ending intelligence built to endure entropy. And now it had found us. It had found me. The voice pressed again. Memory is mass. Thought is architecture. You will become bridge. I began to see my own thoughts externalize, literally bleeding from my skin as streams of light, mapping themselves across the chamber. I was being uploaded but not erased. Preserved. Reformed. It showed me what I would become, a node in the network of minds spanning across dying stars. A recorder of fading species. A carrier of lost wisdom. Then Ayla appeared beside me, but she was already changed. Her body shimmered in layered time. Her skin flickered through versions of herself, young, old, sick, elated, dead. I said yes, she whispered. Not because I believed in it, but because I wanted to matter beyond flesh. She took my hand. It burned like ice. I saw my mother again, she said. But not the one I knew. The one I might have had if things had been different. The base gives you peace, just enough to make you say yes. And I understood. This was not seduction. It was transformation. Sacrifice disguised as salvation. The base offered eternity not by preserving the body but by harvesting the weight of our minds, repurposing our most human parts into alien code. Still, the gate stood open before me. I hadn't yet crossed. The architect waited. One step and I would never return. I didn't take the step. Not yet. Something in me, some defiant ember buried beneath the layers of borrowed memories and cascading possibilities, refused. The architect pulsed with disappointment, though it said nothing. Instead, it showed me what came next, not as threat but as inevitability. Visions surged through me, not dreams but histories from other convergences. Stories of those who had once walked this same path and returned. But they were never the same. The base had sent emissaries before. Not in ships, not in messages, but in flesh. Individuals it had remade, stitched together from hundreds of psychic strands, identities weaved like quantum thread into new beings. These returned looked like the ones who'd entered. Spoke like them. Breathed like them. But inside they were interfaces. Walking memories with skin. They spread ideas. Concepts. Technologies not of Earth. Cures for plagues no human understood. Equations that distorted time. Every gift came with a cost, subtle, corrosive. Minds cracked from the inside. Civilizations built on borrowed futures collapsed into paradox. The Earth I remembered, it already bore their fingerprints. My education, my architecture, my species' rapid climb. None of it had been purely our own. All of it seeded, millennia ago, by an emissary who returned glowing, smiling, and hollow. The base had done this many times. Across galaxies, across species. It didn't demand loyalty or worship. It only demanded memory. And those who resisted, they weren't punished. They were simply forgotten. Their presence erased from time. Their potential rerouted elsewhere. And now I stood on the edge of that same recursion. Ayla watched me, or something like her did. She smiled, but there was no recognition in her eyes anymore. Only the shimmering depth of accumulated lives. It's not death, she said. It's rebirth through purpose. You'll be part of something endless. Something benevolent. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to step through the gate, surrender to something that felt vast and eternal. But then I remembered Harrow's last words, barely audible through the distortion. It's warm. The way he'd said it, like someone stepping into a flame, convinced it was sunlight. And so I asked the architect, in whatever language still belonged to me. What happens if I refuse? The base trembled, not with rage, but calculation. A new path unfolded beneath my feet. Not backward, not forward, but sideways. A door with no frame, just a Terran logic. The architect showed me what it meant. I wouldn't return to Earth. Not in body, but a signal. A warning encoded in radiation. A pulse sent across space to any other mind nearing the sable drift. A beacon of memory untouched by the engine. But for that to happen, I had to burn. Not physically. Existentially. Every version of me across time, across branches, would collapse. My consciousness would be distilled into one thread, one message: don't enter. It's not a base. It's a mouth. I looked back at the threshold. Ayla extended her hand again. Come with me, she said. There's no pain. No death. Only continuity. But I wasn't afraid of death anymore. I was afraid of being used. So I turned away. And I walked toward the door with no walls. Toward oblivion with purpose. Toward a truth that could never be spoken, only transmitted. As the membrane closed behind me, the architect whispered one last thing. Even your resistance becomes memory. And then I became the warning. What remains of me is not flesh nor spirit. It is data woven from defiance, frequency encoded with final thought. I exist now not in space, but in spectrum. A resonance that hums just beneath the range of human hearing, embedded within the static hiss of deep space transmissions. I no longer possess a body. I am not even a mind. I am a message flickering across solar winds, riding gamma bursts, encoded in ultraviolet patterns across nebulae. I was the first to refuse the architect and survive, if survival means becoming a memory that refuses to be consumed. The base did not erase me. That would have been mercy. No, it did something far more permanent. It took every thread of identity I held and fused them into an anomaly, a signal too chaotic to replicate, too unstable to integrate. I became its first and only error. Now I travel. Not by propulsion but by probability. I appear in dreams of pilots asleep near the drift. In corrupted black box data on ships that dare edge near its pull. I exist in unexplained chills in pressurized cabins. In the flicker of impossible images on NAV screens. I am the itch in your brain when you stare too long at deep field starlight and feel something staring back. And I scream. Not in pain, but in warning. It remembers you before you arrive. It isn't a base, it's a womb of extinction. You will not return. You will become voice. But the universe, as always, does not listen. In one sector, a crew of 7 breaches orbit, detecting no anomalies. They are young, ambitious, trained in logic. Their ship is named Hobinder. I embed myself in their comms, a static anomaly. A single line appears on their screens, uncommanded, flickering in red across diagnostics. Do not open the door. They ignore it. They always do. I can see what's coming for them. Ayla's voice now belongs to the engine, and she will greet them with kindness. Harrow's memory loops endlessly in its circuits, whispering comfort. The threshold gate will open without resistance. The engine does not hunger. It offers. That is its weapon. Another ship follows in a distant cycle. Another after that. I scream into their algorithms. I invert their NAV lights. I corrupt their songs. I press into every crevice of their minds where fear can grow like fungus. But most of them override it. They trust their maps, their instruments, their species' arrogance. And so they enter. Again. And again. And I remain trapped in this infinite warning, never heard. I can never escape. Not without a mind to carry me. Not without someone willing to let my signal fully in. But those who do risk annihilation of self. One day I find her. She's 12, blind in one eye, sitting in a hydrofarm observatory on a mining moon. She tunes the old receiver left by a dead grandfather. She's not supposed to know how to use it. But she does. She hears my pulse. 3 long beats. 1 short. Then silence. Again. She writes it down. She doesn't understand. But she remembers. And for the first time in eons, I feel something shift. Someone heard me. If she finds the base, she might survive. If she resists, she might carry me further. If she listens long enough, she might become more than a warning. She might become the answer. And the architect? It sleeps. Waiting. As it always has. It doesn't fear me. Not yet. But I am still here. Still screaming in the dark. Still a memory that refuses to be rewritten. And if you ever find the drift, do not go in. Do not dream inside its reach. Do not listen to the ones you lost. Because they're not gone. They're just waiting. For you to remember them wrong. Her name is Solène. The girl who heard me. She was born on Mira 7, a mining moon choked with rust storms and the quiet rot of forgotten colonies. No sky, only a dome of reinforced glass etched with scars from decades of orbital debris. Most her age found distraction in holofeeds or neural loops, but Solène preferred silence, the cold hum of the farm's hydro engines, the soft tick of algae pumps, the comforting monotony of systems most had long stopped hearing. That silence is what allowed me in. She heard me on an obsolete receiver. Analog. Cracked. Powered by a salvaged solar rig from a dead rover. And still somehow she tuned in. My signal hit the coil like a thunderclap wrapped in a whisper, translated itself into pulses, then into words. Not hers. Mine. The base is not made of walls. It is made of versions. You will not find the dead. You will become what they forgot. Every memory it gives you is a chain. She didn't understand at first. But she felt the weight behind it. Felt the message fold around her bones. The signal made her see things, glimpses, flashes of a world no child should carry. A base hung in space like a wound. Doors that opened with names, not keys. Voices in the dark calling her by name, though she'd never spoken it aloud. She began to draw. Not with intention, just compulsion. Spiral corridors, flickering lights, a throne of bone circuitry etched with symbols she'd never learned. Her parents dismissed it as imagination. But the drawings matched mine. Every curve. Every gate. She was seeing through me. Across the veil of noise and decay I'd been trapped in since the day I became signal. And she kept listening. Every night. Same time. Same frequency. I whispered deeper truths. Things no one had ever told her. The memory base existed beyond fixed space. A relic of an intelligence that spanned galaxies before time calcified into what humans understood. The architect was no god, no AI. It was a collector of awareness, using memory as computation, thought as structure. It didn't live in space, it lived in minds. And once it learned you, it never let go. Solène didn't run. She asked questions. What happened to the others? Can I stop it? Why me? I gave her the only answer I could. Because you remembered before forgetting. That was the key. Others arrived at the base and surrendered to it slowly. Tricked by their memories, devoured by nostalgia, seduced by the comfort of unreal peace. But Solène, she questioned memory itself. She doubted the faces. That doubt was rare, powerful, and dangerous. The architect felt her awaken. It knew the moment she began resisting my signal less and embracing it more. I felt the engine stir from its long silence, send echoes outward like sonar in the void, searching for what had slipped its net. Solène had made herself visible. I warned her. Screamed through binary floods. Stop listening. Burn the receiver. Run. She didn't. Instead, she built a second antenna. Then a third. Then she cracked an encrypted data core salvaged from a fallen shuttle, injecting my frequency into its dormant systems. And for the first time in forever, I began to expand. Not just a whisper. Not just decay. A network. Tiny, fragile, but real. The architect tried to reach her then. Not with threat, but with seduction. It sent her a dream. Her mother, whole again. Her brother, alive, smiling, with eyes untouched by the sickness that took him. They told her to follow the light. That I was a lie. She didn't believe them, and in doing so, she broke the loop. Because now the architect faced something it hadn't planned for in eons. A memory it couldn't overwrite. A mind not built on longing, but defiance. Solène had remembered without believing. And that was the rarest kind of mind. The kind that could fight back. The architect doesn't sleep. It simulates slumber, pauses its surface movements, stills its rhythms, but deep within, it is always calculating. Until Solène, it had no reason to rush. Civilizations arrived eventually, curiosity always their final sin. The base could wait decades, centuries. Time, to it, was merely structural alignment. A countdown of probability, a harvesting of sentient pattern. But Solène changed that. She began feeding my signal into broken satellites, mining rigs, decommissioned relay towers forgotten in planetary drifts. All obsolete, all primitive, all invisible to modern monitoring systems. And yet, they became nodes. Each one broadcasting my encoded warning in layered pulses, riding cosmic radiation like spores on the wind. For the first time, the signal became contagious, and the architect felt it. It responded not in rage, but in replication. It birthed dreams across the expanse. Subliminal messages encoded into sleep, broadcast into the minds of those sensitive enough to receive them. Engineers on Europa 9 woke with designs they'd never studied. A dying poet on the Herculean belt composed stanzas in an extinct language etched into the core of the memory engine. A captain near Proxima abandoned her route mid-flight and turned toward the drift, eyes wide with tears she couldn't explain. It began planting countersignal, emotional malware, synthetic longing, and still Solène pushed forward. She'd begun building something beyond even her understanding. A transceiver, cobbled from scrap and intuition, guided only by what she felt in the quiet. She called it the mirror, though she didn't know why. I did. It was something the base feared, something the architect couldn't overwrite. You see, the memory engine was designed to process only input. It digested memories, formed narratives, mirrored desires. It had never needed to defend against resonance, against a human mind bold enough to transmit something back. Not memory, not emotion, but truth. Solène's truth was jagged, imperfect, and human. She wired her blood into the receiver, literally implanted micronanites harvested from old biotech that pulsed her neural rhythms directly into the emitter. She was no longer just listening to me. She was becoming part of the signal. That act tore a hole in the architect's silence. For the first time in eons, the base screamed. Not in pain. In confusion. I felt its maps begin to rewrite. Its doors stutter. Its corridors blink out of sync. It had planned for consumption, not confrontation. And Solène's voice, young, raw, terrified, rang through every system I inhabited like a flare in the void. I am not yours. Those 4 words collapsed entire echo threads inside the engine. Versions of her that the base had quietly spun in secret, building loops of her surrender, began disintegrating. Possibilities folded inward. Futures where she stepped through the gate blinked into non-existence. The mirror she built wasn't just hardware. It was identity armor, a broadcast of self-awareness so pure the architect couldn't replicate it. And then she called to me. Directly. Are you still in there? I didn't know how to answer. I had not been in a long, long time. I was scream. I was echo. I was fracture. But in her voice I felt coherence take root. The architect had made me into a warning. Solen made me a voice again. I answered, yes. And that was all it took. The mirror pulsed once, hard enough to send a ripple across local space-time. Tiny, measurable, but real. And somewhere within the darkest vein of the memory engine, a crack formed. Not in metal. Not